Welcome to the Explainer. We're going to completely skip the usual agenda today because we are jumping straight into a story that is equal parts tactical masterclass and, honesty, a psychological thriller. We're looking at the 1967 European Cup final. Now, this wasn't just your average football match. No way. This was the exact moment an unstoppable force met an immovable object, and in the process completely destroyed the invincible aura of Italian football. Okay, let's dive into this. Celtic's manager, the legendary Jock Stein, actually summed up this massive ideological clash perfectly when he said, "We did it by playing football. Pure, beautiful, inventive football." Right? This was the ultimate victory of joyful attacking play over cynical defensive submission. But to truly grasp the weight of those words, we kind of need to understand the absolute monster they defeated. So, Section 1, the myth of Catenaccio, the unbeatable system. Back in the mid-1960s, Inter Milan, managed by Helenio Herrera, possessed this unbelievable aura of total invincibility. It was wild. Their system was known as Catenaccio, which literally translates to the door bolt. Tactically, it meant using a deep defensive sweeper, a libero, tucked behind a rigid backline to just mop up any danger. But its real power? That was purely psychological. It was essentially a psychological prison designed to feed on fear. If you played timidly, if you respected their structure, well, they just let you get frustrated and then ruthlessly pick you apart on the counterattack. It was entirely about forcing your submission. And this brilliantly illustrates how Herrera, who was actually known as Il Mago, or the magician, weaponized psychology and discipline. He was way, way ahead of his time. He imposed strict diets and curfews, banned smoking entirely, and plastered the training ground with these super demanding slogans like, "He who gives everything gives nothing." I mean, get this, he even leaked fake team selections to the press just to mess with his opponents' heads. He actively cultivated this ruthless aura, so his players genuinely felt like an elite, untouchable brotherhood. Which brings us to Section 2, the local challengers, a clash of worlds. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the staggering contrast between these two teams. I mean, every global empire eventually meets a challenger, right? But the gap here is wild. On one side, you have the Grande Inter, expensive, global, cynical, back-to-back European champions and total masters of the dark arts. And on the other side, Celtic, the team that would become known as the Lisbon Lions. This was a squad entirely made up of former coal miners and working-class guys, all born incredibly within a 30-mile radius of Glasgow, Scotland. They were driven by a fearless, high-octane philosophy of pure, hyper-aggressive attacking football. Their manager, Jock Stein, knew they couldn't just outplay Inter on the pitch, they absolutely had to outbelieve them. He constantly emphasized the power of the collective, saying that cups are won by men in a team who put the club first. But honestly, his greatest contribution was instilling this strict no-fear doctrine. He gave his local boys the psychological armor they needed to treat the mighty Inter not as these untouchable overlords, but just as equals. They flat out refused to buy into the myth. All right, Section 3, the Battle of Minds, pre-match warfare. You see, this match began long before the referee ever blew his whistle. Both managers engaged in some incredibly intense, high-stakes psychological warfare. First off, Herrera offered Stein a lift on his private jet, only to abruptly cancel it later just to mess up Celtic's travel plans. Then, on match day, Herrera physically tried to claim Celtic's designated bench at the stadium, literally forcing Stein to step in and confront him to assert his own authority. But Stein gave it right back. The day before the game, knowing Italian spies were watching their practice, Stein ran a totally fake training session. He put his players completely out of position and had them play dodgy passes just to mislead the spies. Stein simply refused to be bullied, completely outwitting Herrera's attempts to establish intellectual superiority. Section 4, Shattering the Door Bolt, the 90 minutes in Lisbon. So the stage is finally set on May 25, 1967, at the Estadio Nacional in Lisbon. And right out of the gate, in the 7th minute, Inter's Sandro Mazzola scores a penalty. Boom. The trap is officially set. For literally any other team, this is the exact moment the script dictates that they crumble in panic. Because remember, Inter relies on you giving up. But Celtic, they actually accelerated. Instead of retreating, they completely ignored the script and turned the match into a relentless street fight, and that relentless pressure paid off. In the 63rd minute, Tommy Gemmell fires home this absolute rocket of an equalizer. And then finally, in the 83rd minute, Bobby Murdoch unleashes a long-range shot that Stevie Chalmers brilliantly deflects in for the win. So, the crucial point Here is 39. Let that sink in. 39. That is the staggering amount of total attempts on goal that Celtic unleashed on the supposedly impenetrable Italian defense. 39 shots. No one did that to Inter Milan. I mean, just look at the total devastation on this table. Celtic had 10 corners to Inter's 0. They forced 13 saves compared to their own 2. And those 39 total attempts against Inter's measly 3? This data dramatically evidences how Celtic cognitively overloaded Inter Milan. The Italians were totally used to teams standing off, hesitating, and overthinking, but Celtic completely stripped them of their intellectual superiority through sheer, frantic physical pressure, right up until the precision of the door bolt just shattered completely. But amidst all this immense tactical and psychological history, I absolutely love this quote from Celtic defender Jim Craig. He said, "Neely Mohan had to black over the Puma sign and paint on 3 white stripes. All through the game, I was worrying about missing out on my bonus." It's just perfectly humanizing these players, right? While they were literally busy dismantling a global football empire and changing sports history forever, they were still just local guys worrying about a 33-pound boot sponsor bonus because their coach painted over their boots right before kickoff. Unbelievable. Moving on to Section 5, the psychological aftershock, the legacy. Let's move to and see how this builds into the bigger picture. That localized, fearless mindset didn't just win them a shiny trophy. It caused a massive paradigm shift that sent shockwaves through all of European football. Just listen to Inter legend Sandro Mazzola himself. He openly admitted, "We were really sad after the game, as we understood that we had come to the end of an era. This match represented the end of a cycle." This wasn't just a tough loss. It was a full-blown existential crisis for Inter Milan. Their unbeatable system had failed. They suffered such a severe psychological blow that night, they actually waited another 43 years to win another European Cup. And what you should really take away from this explainer is this incredible concept, the democratization of ambition. Defensive systems, whether we're talking about sports, in business, or frankly in life, are only ever as strong as the psychological submission of the opponent. Fear is the most important variable. Celtic taught the entire world that refusing to accept a narrative of invincibility can tear down absolutely any wall. Which brings us to a final thought for you to ponder today. Is the aura of a dominant team just a self-fulfilling prophecy? And is it truly possible for a team today to be as psychologically dominant as Inter Milan was back in the 1960s? It's pretty fascinating to think about the fragility of dominance in modern sports. Fear is a wildly powerful weapon, but as the Lisbon Lions proved once and for all, courage is the ultimate counterattack. Thank you for joining me on this explainer, and remember, keep questioning those invincible walls.